Dave Palumbo here with an RX Muscle rant. There was a video put out by Bob Cicherillo the last day or so, and it was addressing a podcast that Fouad Abiad had done with a bunch of bodybuilders, Ian Valier, Guy Cisternino. And I guess in the video that Fouad was pointing out that the athletes rep, although he didn't name him by name, it was implied that it was Bob Cicherillo. Was not doing his job, and that there's things that could be fixed, and lighting on stage, and la da 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 da.
Only thing I would say is I wish they had an actual athlete's rep.
That's where I was going when I said
I just
the
wish
involvement.
the only thing I think they have an in-name athlete's rep that doesn't do anything for the athletes.
We need a voice, an actual voice.
Yeah, I wish there was one person that the athletes could go to and actually have a representative that wasn't closer to the IFBB than he was to the athletes.
Yeah,
I guess Bob watched this and took it personally, which he really shouldn't have, because Fouad didn't call him out by name, but I guess it was implied that it was Bob Cicherillo.
We were at the Orlando Pro, Ed and Betty Pariso show, the UBU Expo. Saw Fouad and Nick and the rest of the crew at his booth, and went up just like normal and shook hands. I don't know. I didn't know this guy had an issue or a problem with me, but clearly he does. And first of all, I thought that was pretty, listen, be a man. If you got an issue or a problem, say something, man. I mean, just don't sit there and, make it look like we're friends or we're at least amicable when you got clearly something wrong with.
The truth of the matter is really that Bob is not the athlete's rep. He was the athlete's rep at one point, but given the current crop of bodybuilders out there, no one voted for Bob to be the athlete's rep. Bob doesn't even compete anymore. So, that's another situation I want to talk about in a few minutes. But in order to be an athlete's rep, the athletes have to elect you because you're representing them to talk to the establishment. So if Jim Mannion is the president and Tyler Mannion is the vice president, and you have your judging panel with Steve Weinberger being, the usual head judge, the athlete's rep would be the liaison between the organization, the judging, and the athletes. So the athletes ostensibly would elect an athlete's rep if that's the way the structure was set up, which it doesn't seem to be anymore. I think it should be. And they should represent, it doesn't have to even be a person who competes. It could be an IFBB pro who's retired. Could be Bob. Bob was never elected. Bob was kind of put in place at some point by someone, but Bob is friends with the establishment, meaning that he's friends with Jim Mannion. He's known him for 30, 40 years, since he's competing as a teen. And Bob is friends with, most of the judges he knows, just the way I do as well. And Bob was at one point put in there as an athlete's rep. I don't know if he was elected or not. And he functioned somewhat, he tried to organize a union, and it seemed like at one point he really was genuinely trying, and the athletes just weren't supporting what he was doing. And so he got frustrated and he stopped. So in that respect, Bob really, did try to do something, and he really failed in a sense because no one supported him, because everyone was afraid, oh, someone will take my place if I don't compete at the show. Oh my God. So Bob did his best in that sense. And then Bob just kind of became the liaison, really. And that's really what he is now. He's not an athlete's rep. He's a liaison between, the establishment and the athletes. And he'll kind of relay what the establishment is thinking about doing as far as rule changes. He might propose a few things on his own. We all propose things. I throw things out there as well. But, Bob seems to, be friends with the establishment more so than an athlete's rep. So he's not really representing the athletes. He's kind of representing himself to keep himself important in the industry and entrenched. And that's okay. That's his business, right? I mean, he MC shows. He wants to be a part of the running of the organization. But what I believe should go on, and so if Fouad was referring to him, it might have been a little disrespectful. I think Bob overreacted in a sense and took it personally, but and try to put his resume out there about all the things that he's done or tried to do. And
Listen, I can give you a whole list of stuff I've done. All right, well before you ever turned pro, when you were still up in Canada building snowmen and stuff. All right, we were busy working on getting the athletes rep because we didn't have one at that time. Actually, it was me who put together the pieces to try to start a union back in the day for the athletes, which I know you guys have mentioned a little bit here and there. But I actually did it. I didn't sit around, not that we had podcasts back then, but in interviews and such, talking about it or waxing about it or bitching about it or complaining about it. You know what I did? I actually did something about it.
Fouad kind of like also made a silly statement about the fact that he thought that all the judges should be the same at every show, which was, I think it was, I don't even know what he was thinking when he said that. Obviously, that no one wants to be judged by the same panel. Yeah, if you win, if you're the winner, you want to be judged by the same panel all the time. But no one wants that, because then you get weird decisions because certain people like certain types of physiques. So that's not really a good statement. But I don't think really that really didn't have that much relevance to what Fouad was saying. He was kind of just throwing out stuff, and I don't think he really thought about what he said. But Bob, of course, harped on that because Bob, that was something that made Fouad look foolish, because the other guys didn't really agree with Fouad in that respect. And I mean, why would they? You don't want to be judged by the same person all the time.
It would be cool to have the same judges at all the shows or different judges at all the shows. The same judges at all the shows. I
disagree with that.
Well,
By having the same people constantly win because the opinions are all the same
I don't
all
like
the time.
that.
Yeah.
Having different judges gives different opinions, and I think that's good.
But that really wasn't relevant to the conversation. The conversation was, do we need an athletes rep? Should there be an athletes rep that represents the athletes and then goes to the athletes and says, hey, guys, what do you like about a show? What don't you like? Oh, there's not enough prize money. I'm going to go and I'm going to get you guys more prize money. Oh, you want health insurance, reductions on premiums, by having a group plan. I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to the establishment about this. Or you want better lighting. I'm going to go and talk to them about doing something about the lighting or maybe the backdrop. And I know they're spending a lot of money on LED, crazy, backdrops, but you know what? It doesn't really showcase the physiques the best as it should. And video and pictures don't come out. They're good. I'm going to go talk to you. So the athletes need to sit down, the IFBB pros, to compete, and vote at one of these shows, whether it be the Olympia, which is probably where it should be done, and vote for who they want to be the athletes rep. And of course, a couple people need to come forward and say, look, I'd like to be the athletes rep, because if they elect someone but the person doesn't want to be the athletes rep, obviously that's a problem, right? Personally, I think the best athletes rep, call me crazy, would be Lee Priest, and I'll tell you why. Because Lee was an IFBB pro. Lee is outspoken. He's not afraid to say what's on his mind and what's on the mind of the athletes. He's got no skin in the game right now. He's not competing anymore, really. And even if he was, he wouldn't care anyway. He would still say what the athletes wanted or what was on his mind. And I think he wouldn't be afraid to push the envelope, in the sense that I think a lot of guys, because they do compete, would be afraid to maybe ruffle some feathers because they think maybe it would affect their placings. Love him or hate him, Sean Ray was not a bad athletes rep, because he wasn't afraid to say what was on his mind and what was going on. But Sean, was also very, it's all about Sean. So in a sense, I think a lot of the athletes didn't really, jive with him. That's why I think the athletes rep really should be a retired bodybuilder, because it takes them out of the equation of being self-serving and or worried about maybe affecting their placings. You put someone like Lee Priest in there, and when Lee was competing, he had no problem telling Wayne DeMille, how the prize money was not really distributed properly. It wasn't enough. And he didn't worry about whether he was going to be marked down because of it or not. And that's when he was competing. So if he wasn't competing, imagine, he would be a good guy. There's other guys that would be terrific guys too. Dennis James would be a great guy in there. I think Bob, if he can separate himself from his job as MC, which is something I don't know if he could, because all these promoters and the judges they're kind of hiring him, and he kind of works for the establishment. So it's hard to be partial. It's hard to, to have a hard line in his respect, because he doesn't want to lose jobs. So he wouldn't be good. You got to get someone who has nothing to lose, essentially. And that means someone who's not competing and someone who's not working for, judging shows, or someone who's not per se running, their own shows, or running major shows. Like you wouldn't want to get Jake Wood to be the athletes rep. He runs the Olympia, So you got to get a person who's retired, who's a good speaker, who's not afraid to speak his mind, and elect them. Let that person then, be the liaison, go between, talk to the athletes. What do they want? Make a list, go to the establishment and hammer out that list. And the athletes have to be willing to say, you know what? If the establishment is not going to give us what we want, then we're not going to compete. It has to be like that, or there has to be a negotiation. Let's sit down at the table and negotiate. All right, you know what? You give us this, we'll give you this, and then you have, you meet in between someplace. But there has to be someone who can be a hardline negotiator, yet is also not going to let their ego get involved, where they're going to start saying, I run the show, I'm the athlete's rep. No, there's got to be compromise on both sides. So you push for the important things, and then maybe you give up some of the frivolous things. Sometimes people ask for the athletes want some silly. They might want to get, 5-star hotel accommodations. That might not be something that, that could be done, because it's going to be too expensive for the promoter, and then they're going to lose money because they got to give prize money. But giving more prize money, or having like the establishment, mandate that if you're going to have an open show, you have to give a certain amount of prize money, I think that would be valid. So to summarize, I guess, I think Fouad had a good idea. He might have taken a little bit of a cheap shot at Bob. Bob took it too personally, probably. And if I were Bob, I would have just said, hey, I'm not even the athlete's rep. I was the athlete's rep at one time, but I'm not. No one comes to me and tells me anything. I might have a title as the athlete's rep, but I'm really not the athlete's rep. That would have been a better defense for Bob, I think, rather than say, oh, look at all the stuff I did. You didn't really do that much stuff, okay? You tried at one point, which I totally salute you for that, because you did try to establish a union, which would have been good for the sport, I think, especially at the time that you were doing it. No one supported you. But I think today's bodybuilders are different, because they're much more self-sufficient now, because a lot of these guys make their own money. They don't have to have supplement contracts. There aren't that many supplement contracts. They make their own money from social media, from YouTube, from all that type of stuff. So they're much more likely to back an athlete's rep and stand strong with them, because if you do, you're going to make more money, because if there's more prize money put into the sport, there's better lighting, there's better whatever you guys want. If you may take a stand now so that the athletes in the future and yourselves can benefit from that, that's important, because a lot of you don't even need to compete. You don't need prize money. You don't have supplement, sponsors that are telling you have to compete. You make plenty of money even if you don't get on stage. So the promoters, establishment, need the bodybuilders way more today than they did, say, 20 years ago. So let's do it, man. Elect an athlete's rep, guys. I'm just a humble, maybe not so humble, servant of the industry, so to speak. I look at what's going on, and I give my observations. I'm not an IFBB pro. I'm not a judge. I'm not a promoter. I'm just an observer. And from my point of view and my observational tower that I'm looking at, you guys need an athlete's rep. You need someone you respect, someone who's not afraid to speak their mind, someone who's going to be strong when they need to be, but compromise when it's necessary. And then you guys got to stand behind that guy, and you can't back down. And if he tells you guys, we're not getting on the stage, we're not competing unless they give us a certain what we're asking for, you got to stand tall behind them, because if you don't, it ain't going to work. Something to think about. It's about time, I think, that bodybuilders had representation and had a voice that could change rules, change prize money, change the way the sport is viewed even by the public. I'm Dave Palumbo with an RX Muscle Rant.